Some of history's greatest puzzles have no solution, no matter how hard we look. This video explores 20 historical events that no one can explain, stories where the evidence runs out and leaves us staring into a void. You will gain a new perspective on the past, seeing it not as a settled record, but as a collection of open questions. How did an entire colony of people vanish, leaving only a single word carved in wood? What could cause hundreds of citizens to dance without rest until they collapsed? We are about to walk the line between what we know and what we can only wonder about. What part of the past do you think is forever lost to us? A single word carved into a post is all that remains of a community. In the late 16th century, an English colony was established on Roanoke Island, off the coast of what is now North Carolina. When a supply ship finally returned after a long delay in 1590, the governor found the settlement completely empty. 115 men, women, and children had vanished. There were no signs of a struggle, no hastily abandoned belongings, and no resting place to indicate a tragedy. The only clue was the word Croatoan, the name of a nearby island and a local indigenous group, carved into a fort's post. A second carving, the letters CRO, was found on a tree. Historians like Karen Ordal Kupperman point to the immense logistical challenges these settlers faced, from strained supply lines to unfamiliar terrain. The leading theory suggests they may have split up and integrated with neighboring communities for survival, a practical choice in a desperate situation. Yet the evidence is frustratingly thin. The village itself was found orderly, with houses taken down and a heavy chest buried, suggesting a planned departure, not a panicked flight. Notably absent was the pre-arranged distress signal, a Maltese cross which was never carved. The governor's personal agony added a human layer to the mystery. He returned to find his entire family, including his infant granddaughter Virginia Dare, simply gone. This disappearance forces us to confront the sheer fragility of those early ventures and the stark limits of what evidence can tell us. What does it mean when an entire chapter of history ends not with a period, but with a question mark carved in wood? That eerie silence on a windswept island gives way to our next mystery, one written not in wood but in massive, impossible stones. Massive stones defy the logic of their own time. On the Giza Plateau, the Great Pyramid stands as a testament to a mystery carved in limestone and granite, a project of such staggering ambition that it challenges our understanding of ancient capability. Built for Pharaoh Khufu around 2,560 years before the Common Era, this structure is a mathematical and engineering marvel conceived in an age without iron tools, pulleys, or the wheel. The overseer, a man named Himiunu, managed a workforce that moved an estimated 2.3 million stone blocks, each averaging 2.5 tons, the weight of a large elephant. The precision is breathtaking. The pyramid's sides are aligned to the cardinal points with an error of less than 1/15 of a degree, a feat that would be impressive even with modern instruments. Engineers like Craig B. Smith have calculated the logistics, envisioning a complex system of ramps and a highly organized labor force working for decades, yet the exact methods remain a subject of fierce debate. How were the massive granite beams, some weighing over 60 tons, lifted into the king's chamber near the pyramid's peak? The purpose of the narrow shafts pointing toward specific stars is another puzzle. Were they spiritual pathways for the pharaoh's soul, or did they serve another, more practical function entirely? Unlike later pyramids, the main chambers are eerily bare of the hieroglyphic inscriptions found elsewhere, deepening the silence around its construction secrets. Even the so-called Dixon relics, a set of simple tools discovered inside in the 19th century, offer little practical insight into the sophisticated techniques required. This leads to a profound question. Was this the pinnacle of purely human ingenuity, a masterpiece of coordinated labor and brilliant trial and error? Or does it whisper of a more advanced understanding that has since been lost to time? The pyramid does not hide its grandeur, yet it guards its methods completely, leaving us to wonder at the line between monument and mystery. This architectural precision finds a strange echo far across the ocean, in another ancient landscape where giant drawings were not built upward, but etched into the very earth itself. From the silent desert plains, we plunge into the deep blue sea, where a shipwreck held a secret that would shatter our timeline of human invention. In the year 1900, sponge divers off the coast of the Greek island Antikythera stumbled upon a Roman-era vessel laden with treasures. Among the statues and ceramics was a lump of corroded bronze and wood, so encrusted it was initially set aside as a curiosity. Decades later, as the crust was carefully removed, researchers saw something impossible: intricate gear wheels, precisely cut and meshing together like the inside of a modern clock. This was the Antikythera Mechanism, a device from around 100 years before the Common Era that functioned as an ancient Greek analog computer. The historian and physicist Derek de Solla Price spent years studying it, calling it more valuable than the Mona Lisa for the history of technology. Modern research, led by teams like the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project with scientist Tony Freeth, used advanced imaging like computed tomography scans to peer inside the calcified blocks. They revealed a breathtaking complexity of over 30 bronze gears, some with teeth so fine they were barely a millimeter thick. This wasn't just a calendar, it was a miniature model of the cosmos. By turning a hand crank on the side, an operator could advance the mechanism and see the predicted positions of the sun, the moon, and the 5 known planets against the backdrop of the Egyptian zodiac. It could forecast lunar and solar eclipses, and one dial even tracked the 4-year cycle of the Panhellenic Games, including the Olympics. One of its most astonishing features is a differential gear, a component that allows for the calculation of relative motions. This technology was not seen again in the historical record until the 16th century in Europe, over 1,600 years later. For a long time, it was mislabeled as a simple astrolabe for navigation, its true genius hidden under centuries of corrosion. Its existence forces a monumental question: what level of scientific and mechanical understanding flourished in the Hellenistic world that we have completely missed? This was not a toy for a wealthy philosopher. It was a serious computational instrument, implying a whole workshop tradition and a theoretical grasp of astronomy that history forgot. Why was such groundbreaking technology lost, leaving no trace in the archaeological record until its singular, miraculous survival in a shipwreck? The mechanism stands as a haunting reminder that progress is not a straight line, and that pinnacles of knowledge can vanish into the sea, waiting centuries to be rediscovered. It speaks of a forgotten age of gears and cycles, a concept that finds a strange parallel in a much later era, where the cycles were not of planets but of frantic, unstoppable human movement. A book exists that can be seen but not read. Known as the Voynich Manuscript, it is a 240-page codex, carbon dated to the early 15th century, filled with illustrations of plants that have never grown on Earth, intricate astronomical diagrams, and page after page of elegant, curling script in an alphabet that belongs to no known language. Its pages show women bathing in what appear to be interconnected green tubes and pools, alongside celestial charts that seem to map unknown constellations. For over a century, this volume has been the ultimate cryptographic puzzle, resisting the efforts of the world's greatest codebreakers, including those who cracked enemy ciphers during the Second World War. Scholar Renee Zandbergen, who maintains a comprehensive online resource about the manuscript, notes the profound oddity of its botany: plants with leaves and roots that defy biological classification, existing in a realm between reality and fantasy. The text itself possesses a haunting internal logic, with word structures and character frequencies that mimic a genuine language, yet it yields no meaning. The major theories about its origin are as varied as they are compelling. Some argue it is an elaborate, centuries-old hoax, crafted to deceive a wealthy patron. Others propose it is written in a constructed language or a complex cipher, perhaps encoding a forgotten European dialect or herbal knowledge. A more speculative idea suggests it records a lost natural language, its meaning forever severed from our understanding. The manuscript is organized into distinct sections: herbal, astronomical, biological, cosmological, and pharmaceutical, each adding a layer of depth to the mystery. The script flows with a natural, practiced hand, indicating the writer was not inventing gibberish but recording something they understood. Consider the case of William Friedman, one of the fathers of modern American cryptography, who led the team that broke Japan's purple cipher. In his retirement, he assembled a group of brilliant minds, calling it the Voynich Manuscript Study Group, dedicating years to the puzzle. They applied every analytical technique they knew, from frequency analysis to pattern recognition, and yet they retired in defeat, the book's secret intact. What is it about an unsolvable puzzle that captivates us so completely, drawing in the sharpest minds across generations? Is it the allure of hidden knowledge, the possibility that within these pages lies a forgotten science or a unique view of the universe? Or is the greater lesson in the manuscript's very resistance a testament to the limits of our own perception and the enduring power of a mystery that simply will not break? This silent, beautiful text, holding its secrets close, reminds us that some messages from the past are delivered not to be understood, but to humble us. And just as this mystery is etched on vellum, others are inscribed on a far grander scale, carved into the very skin of the earth itself, where they can only be seen from the sky. The desert holds images meant for the sky. On the arid plains of southern Peru, the Nazca culture created one of the world's most enigmatic art galleries, not on walls but on the floor of a vast plateau. Between 500 years before the Common Era and 500 years after, they etched hundreds of geometric lines, trapezoids, and colossal figures of animals and plants into the desert crust. These are the Nazca Lines, geoglyphs so immense that their full form can only be appreciated from the air, a perspective their creators could never have physically achieved. The hummingbird stretches over 300 feet, its wings precise and graceful. A spider, nearly 150 feet long, is rendered with anatomical accuracy. A being often called the astronaut, with its large round head, stands watch from a hillside. Their preservation over 2 millennia is a miracle of the environment, a region where wind is minimal and rain almost non-existent, allowing the designs to remain crisply defined. Archaeologist Johann Reinhard has long argued that the lines are deeply connected to ritual pleas for water, a vital and scarce resource in the desert. The figures, he suggests, may represent deities or symbols linked to fertility and mountains, where water was believed to originate. The method of creation was deceptively simple yet required immense communal effort. By removing the top layer of dark, sun-oxidized stones and pebbles, they exposed the lighter-colored sand and clay beneath. This contrast created the lines, which are essentially shallow trenches only a few inches deep. The real mystery lies in the execution. How did they achieve such straight lines over miles of terrain, or maintain the perfect proportions of a monkey with a spiraling tail, without ever seeing the full composition? Researchers propose they used simple surveying techniques, perhaps with ropes and stakes, scaling up small models plotted on a grid. Theories about their purpose have ranged from the scientific to the spectacular. After their modern discovery by commercial pilots in the 1920s, some suggested they were landing strips for ancient visitors from other worlds. Others saw them as a giant astronomical calendar, aligning with celestial events. The most enduring explanation, however, roots them in the spiritual world of the people who made them. This was not a message for us or for travelers from the stars, but perhaps a sacred landscape, a prayer written on the earth so large that only the gods in the sky could read it. Were these lines a form of communication with the divine, a way to ensure life-giving water would continue to flow? Or do they map something more tangible, a reflection of underground water sources or ritual pathways walked during ceremonies? The desert keeps its silence, offering up breathtaking images but withholding their original language. This vast, open-air mystery of lines leading to the horizon gives way to a secret hidden in darkness, a puzzle not etched on the land but sealed within a tomb. Greenland's silent fjords hold the ghost of a lost European frontier. For nearly 500 years, Norse settlers from Iceland carved out a life in this immense, icy landscape, establishing two main settlements on the southwestern coast around 985. These were not fleeting outposts but thriving communities with hundreds of farms, a cathedral, and even their own bishop. They raised cattle, built churches from stone, and traded walrus ivory and narwhal tusks with Europe. Then, by the middle of the 15th century, they were gone. The eastern and western settlements fell silent, leaving behind empty farms and a mystery as deep as the northern winters. This was not a sudden vanishing like Roanoke, but a slow, grinding fade to black, the end of a society that had weathered centuries. Archaeologists like Thomas H. McGovern have pieced together a story of a civilization squeezed by a perfect storm of challenges. The primary force was a changing climate. The onset of what we call the Little Ice Age brought longer, colder winters and shorter growing seasons, making it increasingly difficult to sustain the pastoral farming at the core of Norse life. Sea ice expanded, blocking crucial trade routes to Iceland and Norway for years at a time. Imagine the isolation, watching the horizon season after season for a sail that never appears. Their economy, heavily reliant on exporting ivory, also faced collapse. As elephant ivory became more available in Europe, the market for walrus tusks dwindled, cutting off a vital source of income and imported goods like iron and timber. Then there were the neighbors, the Thule people, ancestors of the modern Inuit, were masters of the Arctic environment, skilled hunters who used kayaks and harpoons to thrive where the Norse struggled. While evidence of direct, violent conflict is sparse, the arrival of a better adapted culture would have increased competition for scarce marine resources like seals. The archaeological record paints a poignant picture of a society in retreat. At a farm known as the Farm Beneath the Sand, tools were found left in place, as if the inhabitants intended to return but never did. The last written record is a church record from 1408, documenting a wedding in H. Valsey Church. After that, only silence. A ship that arrived later reportedly found the settlements abandoned, with only wild cattle roaming near the ruins. So what truly happened? The leading theory is not one of dramatic catastrophe, but of a gradual, heartbreaking decision. As conditions worsened, young families likely began to trickle back to Iceland or mainland Scandinavia. The community's social fabric, its ability to maintain ships and conduct trade, would have unraveled. The last remaining individuals may have simply been unable to carry on, perhaps succumbing to illness or hardship without the means to leave. This disappearance forces us to ask profound questions about resilience and adaptation. Why did the Norse, clinging to their European identity, continue to farm cattle in a land increasingly suited only to hunting and fishing while the Inuit flourished? Was it cultural stubbornness or a deep-seated identity they could not abandon? The lost colony of Greenland stands as a solemn lesson in the fragility of even the hardiest settlements when faced with environmental shift, economic ruin, and cultural isolation. It is a story not of a single event but of a slow dimming, a community that whispered out of existence, leaving its stone walls to the wind. This narrative of a civilization succumbing to the elements shifts our focus to a single, profound artifact, one that seems to defy the very flow of time itself. A vibrant civilization on Crete thrived in harmony with the sea, only to be silenced in an instant. The Minoans, a sophisticated Bronze Age culture centered around magnificent palaces like Knossos, were masters of the Mediterranean around 3,600 years ago. Their society was marked by stunning art, complex architecture, and a script linear A that we still cannot read. Then, around 1450 years before the Common Era, this flourishing world met a sudden and dramatic end. The palaces were violently destroyed by fire, and the culture was so severely weakened that mainland Mycenaean Greeks soon moved in to take control. The precise catalyst for this collapse, however, remains one of history's most heated debates. Archaeologist Jan Driessen and others point to clear evidence of widespread conflagration and societal disruption across Crete, but the spark that started it all is elusive. The leading suspect for over a century has been the colossal volcanic eruption on the island of Thera, modern-day Santorini. This was one of the largest volcanic events in human history, estimated to be many times more powerful than the eruption of Krakatoa. The immediate effects would have been apocalyptic. A towering column of ash would have blotted out the sun, plunging the region into darkness. Pyroclastic flows, surges of superheated gas and rock, would have raced across the sea. Most devastatingly, the collapse of the volcano's caldera would have triggered a tsunami of unimaginable scale. Sediment studies on the northern coast of Crete have uncovered marine debris and chaotic layers far inland, suggesting a giant wave did indeed crash ashore, capable of obliterating the Minoan fleet and coastal settlements in minutes. Beyond the immediate destruction, the long-term climatic effects would have been crippling. Ice cores from Greenland contain sulfate spikes from this exact period, evidence of a volcanic winter that could have shrouded the globe, leading to failed harvests and famine for years. Yet some archaeologists argue the timeline does not perfectly align, suggesting the Thera eruption may have occurred a generation or two before the final collapse. This has given rise to other compelling theories. Could a series of massive earthquakes, common in the tectonically active Aegean, have toppled the great palaces first, leaving the society vulnerable? Or was the downfall ultimately internal, a rebellion or a civil conflict that fractured the civilization from within, making it unable to withstand any external shock? The archaeological record shows a telling pattern at sites like Knossos. There is evidence of rebuilding after an initial disaster, followed by a final, total abandonment. This suggests a society that tried to recover but could not sustain itself. How does a civilization process and recover from a natural disaster of biblical proportions, and why do some never get back on their feet? The Minoan collapse presents a case study in multidimensional catastrophe, where a single knockout blow may not be to blame, but rather a cascade of disasters, both natural and human-made, that pushed a brilliant society past its breaking point. The ash-covered legacy of Thera leads to a mystery of an entirely different kind of disappearance, one not caused by earth-shattering force, but by a quiet, deliberate decision to walk away from home. Egyptian temple walls tell a story of chaos and fire. Carved in stone, reliefs at Medinet Habu show a desperate naval battle, with warriors in horned helmets leaping from distinctive ships, their bows carved like bird heads clashing with Egyptian forces. These are the Sea Peoples, a shadowy confederation of tribes whose sudden, violent appearance around 1,200 years before the Common Era is credited with helping to shatter the interconnected world of the late Bronze Age. Historians like Eric H. Klein describe them as a perfect storm of invaders, a migratory force that swept across the eastern Mediterranean, toppling the Hittite Empire, sacking great cities like Ugarit, and bringing mighty kingdoms to their knees. Yet, for all the destruction they wrought, their origins and ultimate fate remain one of antiquity's greatest mysteries. The Egyptians who fought them in great battles under pharaohs Merneptah and Rameses III recorded their names: the Peliset, the Shekelesh, the Denyen, the Lukka, but these labels offer only the vaguest of clues, likely referring to their homelands. This has led to a century of scholarly detective work, with theories linking them to regions scattered across the map. Some propose they came from the Aegean world, perhaps displaced Mycenaean Greeks or other groups from Anatolia. Others look to the central Mediterranean, suggesting the Shekelesh gave their name to Sicily, the Shardonna to Sardinia. Were they a desperate coalition of refugees displaced by famine or earlier upheavals, turning to raiding as they moved, or were they ambitious marauders exploiting a moment of systemic weakness? The most tangible legacy comes from the Peliset, who after their defeat by Egypt are believed to have settled on the southern coast of Canaan, becoming the Philistines of biblical fame. Their material culture, featuring distinctive pottery and hearths, appears suddenly in the archaeological record, supporting this idea of a foreign settlement. This connection provides a rare anchor in a sea of speculation, but it only solves one piece of the puzzle. The broader question is profound. Were the Sea Peoples the primary cause of the late Bronze Age collapse, or were they merely a symptom of it, moving into a power vacuum created by a confluence of earthquakes, drought, and the breakdown of international trade networks? They appear in history like a sudden, violent storm, wreak unimaginable havoc, and then simply fade from the record, absorbed into the landscapes they conquered or vanishing back into the mist from which they came. Their story forces us to confront how history remembers conquerors, not by who they were, but solely by the scars they left on the civilizations that survived to write them down. This enigmatic force, a blur of movement and conflict, gives way to a mystery of a singular, stationary figure whose silent gaze has captivated the world for centuries. In the bustling streets of Nuremberg in 1828, a teenage boy appeared, swaying on his feet and clutching a strange letter. He could barely speak, uttering only a few confused phrases, and walked with the unsteady gait of a toddler. This was Kaspar Hauser, and his sudden arrival launched one of the 19th century's most perplexing human mysteries. The letter he carried, addressed to a cavalry captain, offered a bizarre explanation, claiming the boy had been left in the writer's care as an infant and had never been allowed to step outside a single room. Kaspar himself, as he slowly learned to communicate, described a childhood spent in total isolation, in a small, darkened cell where he was fed only bread and water by a silent man. His captor, he said, finally taught him a few words and how to walk before abandoning him in the city square. Doctors and psychologists who examined him were astonished. He was physically underdeveloped, recoiled from ordinary foods, and was mesmerized by simple things like a burning candle, which he tried to grasp, burning his fingers. Yet he also displayed a peculiar aptitude for drawing, and after patient tutoring, learned to read and write with remarkable speed, even penning an autobiography. The public and authorities were torn between sympathy and suspicion. Was this a genuine case of profound deprivation, a cunning fraud, or something far more sinister? The mystery deepened with violence. On 2 separate occasions, Kaspar was found wounded, claiming he had been attacked by a hooded stranger. Then, in 1833, he stumbled home with a deep stab wound to his chest, dying 3 days later. He claimed his assailant had lured him to a park with a promise of information about his origins. A small purse was found at the scene containing a cryptic note written in mirror writing, its message as opaque as his life story. This tragic end fueled the most dramatic theory of all, that Kaspar Hauser was the hereditary prince of Baden, a rightful heir switched at birth with a dying baby to secure a rival branch of the family's succession. Proponents point to curious official interest in his case from the Grand Duchy of Baden and alleged physical resemblances. Others argue he was simply a clever impostor, perhaps with cognitive differences, exploited by those around him for notoriety or profit. His story captivated a Europe fascinated by the idea of the wild child and the romantic notion of hidden royalty. Why does his brief, tragic life still haunt us? Perhaps because it touches on our deepest fears of isolation and our longing for identity. Kaspar Hauser remains an enigma, a human question mark whose true story was buried with him, a solitary mystery of a single life that stands in stark contrast to those woven from the actions of thousands. High above the ancient city of Cusco, a fortress of stone defies simple explanation. The walls of Sacsayhuamán, built by the Inca in the 15th century, form a series of immense, jagged teeth against the sky, a zigzag pattern thought to represent the head of a puma guarding the city below. But it is not the shape that stuns the modern observer, it is the sheer impossibility of its construction. Here, colossal blocks of andesite, some weighing well over 100 tons, are fitted together in a dizzying, three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. The stones are irregular, polygonal, and yet they lock together with a precision so absolute that not even the thinnest blade can be inserted between them, all achieved without mortar, without the wheel, and without iron tools. How did a civilization without these technologies conceive and execute such a monumental feat of engineering? The process began miles away at the quarry of Roanoke. Researchers like engineer Jean-Pierre Protzen, who spent years studying Inca construction, believe the stones were first pounded into a rough shape using heavy stone hammers. You can still see the evidence today. The pockmarked surfaces on unfinished blocks at the quarry sites tell a story of immense, patient labor. But shaping is one thing, fitting is another. The leading theory involves a process of trial and error so sophisticated it borders on artistry. A block would be dragged to the wall, placed against its neighbor, and the points of contact would be marked. The stone would then be lowered, and the masons would painstakingly peck away at the marked areas, slowly refining the fit. They would lift and test, over and over, until the two faces married perfectly. To move these titanic weights, the Inca relied on human power, levers, earthen ramps, and ropes made from tough grasses. Imagine teams of hundreds coordinating with rhythmic calls, inching a single stone up a temporary ramp made of soil and clay, a ramp that would later be dismantled, leaving no trace of its existence. Some Spanish chroniclers, witnessing the scale centuries later, could not believe it was human work, attributing it to demons or giants. This has fueled more speculative ideas, like the notion that the Inca possessed a plant-based liquid that could soften stone, allowing them to mold it like clay. While a compelling story, there is no archaeological or chemical evidence to support this. The true genius may be more subtle. Look at the famous 12-angled stone, a masterpiece of masonry tucked into a wall near Cusco's center. It is not at a fortress, but in a more ordinary setting, proving this skill was applied widely. Each of its 12 sides interfaces perfectly with the surrounding blocks, a testament to a deep, intuitive understanding of geometry and stress distribution. The walls themselves are not vertical but slope inward, a design that makes them incredibly resistant to the earthquakes that frequent the region. This was not just building, it was thinking in 4 dimensions, considering time and seismic force. What does Sacsayhuamán ultimately tell us? It speaks of a society with an extraordinary capacity for communal labor, organized with a precision that matched their stonework. It hints at a vast, orally transmitted body of engineering knowledge, a tactile wisdom of stone and friction that was never written down and thus, with the fall of the empire, was largely lost. The fortress stands as a permanent question, challenging our assumptions about what is possible with human hands, patience, and collective purpose. It is a mystery not of disappearance, but of enduring presence, a silent monument to a technique we can see but cannot fully replicate. This story of a civilization moving mountains of stone leads to a puzzle of a different kind of movement, one that swept across an entire continent with inexplicable purpose. The Pacific Ocean is a canvas of blue so vast it could swallow every continent and still have room for more. Into this emptiness, a people set sail in canoes no longer than a modern bus, with no compass, no maps, and no sight of land for weeks. The Polynesian expansion is not a mystery of disappearance, but one of breathtaking arrival, a story of how humans conquered the greatest wilderness on Earth using only their deep knowledge of the natural world. Beginning around 1,500 years before the Common Era, these master voyagers embarked from a homeland in the Western Pacific, likely the islands of Tonga and Samoa. Generation by generation, they pushed further east and north and south, discovering and settling specks of land scattered across 10 million square miles of open ocean. They reached Hawaii, they reached New Zealand, they reached the most isolated inhabited island on the planet, Rapa Nui, also known as Easter Island. This was all accomplished centuries, even millennia, before European explorers like Magellan or Cook, with their metal tools and written charts, dared to venture so far from sight of shore. How was such a feat humanly possible? The answer lies in a sophisticated science of wayfinding, a living library of environmental cues passed down through song and apprenticeship. Modern navigator Nainoa Thompson, who helped revive this art, describes it as a holistic dialogue with the ocean. Navigators, or wayfinders, memorized a mental star compass, knowing which stars rose and set over specific island groups. By day, they read the ocean itself, the direction and shape of swells refracted around islands, the flight patterns of homing birds like the golden plover, and the subtle changes in cloud color and formation that hinted at land over the horizon. They even tasted the salinity of the air and watched for drifting vegetation. This was not blind drifting, it was highly intentional navigation. The great double-hulled voyaging canoe Hokulea proved this definitively in the 1970s. Built using traditional designs and navigated from Hawaii to Tahiti and back without instruments by the legendary Micronesian navigator Maupiailug, the voyage silenced skeptics and ignited a cultural renaissance across Polynesia. It demonstrated that the journeys described in oral histories were not myths, but records of genuine exploration. But what motivated this epic, multi-generational migration? Scholars have long debated whether each new discovery was a planned quest or a fortunate accident. The sheer scale and pattern suggest a mix of both. Factors like population pressure, the search for new resources like fishing grounds and arable land, and even social dynamics like the ambitions of chiefly lineages likely drove organized expeditions. Yet, the Pacific is also a realm of powerful currents and storms, and some canoes were undoubtedly blown far off course, leading to the accidental discovery of islands like Rapa Nui. Once settled, the connections did not necessarily end. Evidence from linguistics shows a clear family tree of Polynesian languages, all branching from a common root. Archaeology reveals the spread of a portable toolkit of crops, including taro, coconut, and breadfruit, carried in the canoes as living plants. Perhaps most astonishing is the humble sweet potato, a crop native to South America. Its presence across Polynesia, with a name derived from the Quechua word kumara, suggests that these incredible voyagers may have reached the Americas and returned, completing the final leg of humanity's epic dispersal across the globe. What does this chapter of history teach us? It is a testament to human courage, certainly, but even more so to profound observation and environmental literacy. These navigators did not conquer the ocean, they learned its language and moved in harmony with it. Their story reframes exploration not as a product of advanced technology, but of deep ancestral knowledge and an unshakable trust in the signs written in the stars, the waves, and the wings of birds. This spirit of navigation across the open sea brings us to one of their most remote outposts, an island where a different kind of mystery stands in silent, monumental rows. Their silent, brooding gaze looks out from one of the most remote places on Earth. On Rapa Nui, also known as Easter Island, nearly 900 massive stone figures called Moai stand as eternal sentinels, their backs to the sea, watching over the land. These are not just statues, they are the physical embodiment of a profound historical puzzle, one that asks how a small, isolated society created such monumental works and what ultimately happened to the people who built them. The traditional story, popularized by researchers like Jared Diamond, is a stark parable of ecocide. It tells of a people who arrived on a lush, palm-forested island around 1200 years ago. In a frenzy of statue construction to honor their ancestors, they cut down every tree to use as rollers and levers to move the multi-ton moai. With the forests gone, the soil eroded, crops failed, and the society descended into conflict and collapse long before Europeans ever arrived. This narrative paints the Moai as symbols of a society's self-destruction, but recent archaeology, led by scientists like Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo, has dramatically rewritten this script, revealing a story far more complex and ultimately more human. Their work suggests the island's deforestation was not solely the work of humans, but was accelerated by the stowaway arrival of the Polynesian rat, which devoured the seeds of the native palm trees, preventing the forest from regenerating. The timeline itself has been compressed, with more accurate radiocarbon dating indicating human arrival closer to 1200 years ago, not much earlier, meaning the society's rise and transformation happened within a tighter, more dynamic frame. The true engineering marvel lies in the quarry of Roanoke, a volcanic crater where 95% of the Moai were born. Here, the island's soft volcanic tuff was carved directly from the rock face. Nearly 400 Moai remain there in various states, from just outlined to nearly free, creating an eerie, unfinished workshop frozen in time. The largest Moai ever carved, nicknamed El Gigante, lies unfinished in the quarry, stretching over 70 feet long and weighing an estimated 270 tons. But the central question has always been, how did they move these giants, some weighing up to 80 tons, for miles across the island without wheels or large animals? For decades, the accepted theory involved wooden sledges or rollers on log tracks, a method that fed directly into the ecocide tale. Then, Hunt and Lipo proposed a radically different and elegantly simple idea, that the statues were designed to walk. In experiments, they showed that with 3 teams of ropes pulling and rocking a replica Moai from side to side, a small group could maneuver the statue in a forward, shuffling gait. The Moai's distinctive design, with a forward lean and a curved base, actually facilitates this rocking motion. This method would require far fewer people and, crucially, no trees at all. Other evidence points to a network of prepared roads, not for rolling logs, but as leveled paths for this careful, ritualized procession. The story takes its darkest turn not with the statue building, but with what came after. The society did not vanish, instead it transformed. Sometime in the 17th century, the statue cult ended. The Moai were deliberately toppled, many broken at the neck. This was likely not an act of mindless violence, but a profound societal shift. The focus turned from ancestor worship to a new, competitive ritual centered on the birdman cult, where warriors would swim to a nearby islet to retrieve the first sooty-tern egg of the season. This shift may reflect a change in power structures or a spiritual adaptation to new environmental realities. The final blow to Rapa Nui society came with European contact in the 18th century, which introduced devastating illnesses and slave raids that decimated the population. The toppled Moai became a symbol of a culture presumed lost. Yet, in a powerful act of reclamation, modern Rapa Nui people, with the help of archaeologists and engineers, have since re-erected several of the great moai on their ceremonial platforms, or ahu. This modern revival is a testament not to a people who failed, but to a culture of profound resilience. So, what does the true story of the moai tell us? Is it a simple warning about cutting down trees, or is it a deeper lesson about cultural ingenuity and adaptation? The statues stand not as tombstones for a foolish society, but as monuments to human ambition, their silent gaze now watching over a people who survived catastrophe and are rediscovering their strength. This story of looking to stone ancestors shifts our perspective upward to a mystery written not on land, but in the patterns of the night sky itself. The sky split in two with a blinding flash. On June 30th, 1908, a colossal explosion ripped through the air above a remote Siberian forest near the Tunguska River. The force was staggering, flattening an estimated 80 million trees across 2,000 square kilometers of taiga, an area nearly the size of a major modern city. The shockwave circled the globe twice, and for nights afterward, skies across Europe and Asia glowed so brightly that people could read newspapers outdoors at midnight. Yet, when scientists finally reached the remote site over a decade later, led by mineralogist Leonid Kulik, they found the epicenter of this cataclysm utterly baffling. There was no crater. The trees at ground zero were stripped and standing upright, while those farther out were felled in a vast, radial pattern like matchsticks. This absence of an impact crater is the core of the Tunguska mystery, a puzzle that has fueled a century of speculation ranging from rigorous science to the wildly imaginative. Researchers sifting through the soil found microscopic spheres of silicate and magnetite, tiny beads of melted rock, that point to an extraterrestrial object vaporizing in the atmosphere. The leading scientific explanation, supported by modern models, is an airburst, a stony meteoroid or perhaps a fragment of a comet, roughly 60 meters across, entered Earth's atmosphere at tens of thousands of miles per hour. About 5 to 10 kilometers above the ground, the immense pressure and heat caused it to explode with the force of 10 to 15 million tons of TNT, hundreds of times more powerful than the atomic bomb used on Hiroshima. The blast was a thermal and pressure wave, not a solid impact, which explains the devastation without a crater. This has not stopped other theories from taking root. The lack of a crater led some to propose a microscopic black hole passing through the Earth, or the catastrophic failure of an alien spacecraft. A more terrestrial idea suggested a massive eruption of natural gas from deep within the Earth's crust. Yet, the physical evidence and the first-hand accounts from the indigenous Evenki reindeer herders firmly anchor the event in the cosmos. They described a second sun moving across the sky, a pillar of fire, and a heat so intense it felt like their shirts were on fire. Their camps were blown away and hundreds of reindeer were lost. The Tunguska Event stands as the largest impact event in recorded history, and it happened over an unpopulated area by sheer cosmic luck. It forces a sobering reflection: how vulnerable is our modern, interconnected world to a similar event today? If such an airburst occurred over a populated region, the devastation would be unimaginable. Tunguska serves as a crucial natural experiment, teaching us about the frequency and effects of near-Earth objects and underscoring the importance of planetary defense programs that now scan the skies for potential threats. This cosmic warning shot, etched into the Siberian wilderness, reminds us that some of history's greatest mysteries are written not in stone, but in scorched earth and fallen trees, pointing our gaze upward to the silent hazards traveling through space. The open sea can offer a mystery as vast and empty as the horizon itself. In December 1872, the British brigantine de Gracia spotted another ship, the Mary Celeste, drifting aimlessly in the Atlantic midway between the Azores and Portugal. Her sails were partially set, but she was yawing strangely, as if no hand was on her wheel. When the crew of the Dei Gratia boarded, they found a scene of profound and unsettling silence. The ship was seaworthy, with a cargo of over 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol still securely stowed. There was plenty of food and fresh water. Yet the Mary Celeste was utterly abandoned. Her captain, Benjamin Briggs, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, and a crew of 7 experienced sailors had vanished without a trace. The last log entry was from 10 days prior, noting routine weather. The only lifeboat was gone, but everything else pointed to a sudden, orderly departure. Maritime historians, like those analyzing the case for Lloyd's of London, have scrutinized every detail. The ship's papers and navigational instruments were missing, suggesting the captain took them. Yet the crew's personal belongings, their pipes, their clothing, even a child's toys, were all left behind. This was no act of piracy, as nothing of value was taken. There were no signs of a struggle or violence, save for a single, unexplained cut on the wooden railing. The ship's pump had been dismantled, and a sounding rod, used to measure water in the hold, was found on deck. These clues hint at a crew actively dealing with some perceived emergency right up to the moment they left. So what could have prompted such a desperate decision to abandon a perfectly sound vessel in the middle of the ocean? The most plausible theory centers on the volatile cargo. 9 of the alcohol barrels in the hold were later found empty. Industrial alcohol gives off heavy, explosive fumes. The captain, smelling these fumes or hearing a loud noise from a barrel expanding in the heat, may have feared an imminent, catastrophic explosion. In a moment of panic, he might have ordered everyone into the lifeboat, tethered to the ship by a rope, to wait at a safe distance. If that rope then snapped or was cut by the ship's propeller, the lifeboat would have been left adrift as the Mary Celeste sailed on, unharmed. Another possibility is a sudden waterspout or a minor seismic event that caused the crew to believe the ship was taking on water faster than it was. They might have abandoned ship for the lifeboat, only to watch helplessly as their vessel did not sink. The missing navigational tools make sense if the captain hoped to find land, but the personal effects left behind speak to an expectation of a swift return that never happened. Later sensational accounts, fueled by a young Arthur Conan Doyle writing a fictionalized version, injected tales of sea monsters, alien abduction, and bloody mutiny into the void of evidence. But the truth is likely more tragic and human, a cascade of small fears and a single, fatal misjudgment made under the immense pressure of the open sea. Why does this single ghost ship haunt us so deeply more than any other? Perhaps because it holds up a mirror to the fundamental terror of the age of sail, the understanding that a solid deck beneath your feet was a fragile illusion, and that the line between safety and catastrophe could be crossed in a single, irreversible decision. The Mary Celeste is not just a mystery of where 10 people went, but a story about the moment when rational people, faced with the unknown, choose the greater peril in a desperate attempt to escape a lesser one. That empty deck, a stage with all the actors vanished mid-scene, gives way to a mystery not of absence, but of a presence so massive it was hidden in plain sight for centuries. Rows of grey sentinels march across the Breton landscape in silent, perfect lines. On the coast of Brittany in France, the Carnac Alignments present a mystery not of a single monument, but of a vast, organized army of stone. Here, over 3,000 prehistoric standing stones, known as menhirs, are arranged in dense parallel rows that stretch for kilometers, a megalithic project that took centuries to complete during the Neolithic period, roughly between 4,500 and 3,300 years before the Common Era. The sheer scale is overwhelming, yet what is most haunting is the complete silence that surrounds them. Unlike the pyramids or later temples, the people who built Karnak left no written records, and no oral tradition has survived to explain why they moved these massive granite blocks, some weighing tens of tons, into such precise formations. Archaeologists studying the site, like researchers from the French National Institute for Preventive Archaeological Research, are left to interpret the silent stones through the patterns they form. The site is divided into several major sectors, each with its own character. The Carnac Alignments include over 1,100 stones in 11 converging rows. Further east, the Camarillo sector continues the pattern, and the Carnac Alignments complete the grand design, often ending at a semicircle of larger stones. Scattered among these rows are burial mounds or tumuli and dolmens, which are stone table tombs, suggesting a deep connection between the alignments and rituals surrounding remembrance and the afterlife. So what was the purpose of this colossal undertaking? The leading theories are as compelling as they are varied. One strong idea is that the rows formed a sacred processional way, a path walked during seasonal ceremonies to connect the community with ancestral spirits and the rhythms of nature. Another, supported by surveys of the site's orientation, suggests an astronomical function. The rows may have been aligned to mark the rising and setting of the sun and moon during solstices and equinoxes, turning the landscape into a giant calendar to guide planting, harvesting, and ritual cycles. A third theory views the alignments as a physical map of social structure or cosmology, with different rows perhaps representing clans or lineages within the society, a permanent stone charter of their place in the world. Local legend offers a more colorful explanation that the stones are a Roman legion turned to stone by the wizard Merlin, forever frozen in their ranks. While a charming story, it speaks to the human need to explain the inexplicable. The true enigma of Carnac is not just the how, but the why that sustained the effort across generations. What unified vision or belief system could motivate a society to dedicate such immense labor, century after century, to a project that offered no immediate shelter or defense? The stones do not boast of a king's power, they whisper of a communal faith, a shared understanding of the universe so strong it was literally set in stone. This silent, collective testament of an ancient people leads us to consider a mystery from a culture famous for its written records, yet one that chose to remain silent on a point of profound importance. The standard of the Ninth Legion, a symbol of Roman power, simply stops appearing in the records. The Legio Nona Hispana, a veteran unit that had fought for centuries from Spain to Britain, was last firmly attested in the northern reaches of the province around 108 years after the Common Era. After that, it vanished from history, leaving behind one of Rome's most enduring military mysteries and a powerful legend of 5,000 men swallowed by the Caledonian mists. The romantic narrative, immortalized in works like Rosemary Sutcliffe's novel The Eagle of the Ninth and its film adaptation, The Eagle, tells of the Legion marching north from its fortress at York into the hostile highlands of Scotland, never to return, annihilated by the fierce tribes of the north. This story of a glorious, tragic end in battle resonates deeply, but the historical evidence paints a far more ambiguous and intriguing picture. Historians like Miles Russell point out the frustrating lack of a smoking gun, or in this case, a definitive battlefield. No archaeological site in Scotland has yielded the concentrated remains and scattered equipment that would signal the destruction of an entire legion. Instead, the clues point elsewhere. Tiles stamped with the legion's name have been found at a site in the modern-day Netherlands, suggesting the Ninth was transferred to the Rhine frontier. Furthermore, a later Roman document known as the Notitia Dignitatum, which lists all active legions in the later empire, does not include the Ninth, indicating it was gone by that time. The plot thickens with a fascinating personal artifact, a bronze diploma or discharge certificate awarded to a veteran of the Ninth Legion. This document is dated to the 150s, decades after the Legion's supposed disappearance in Britain. This single find suggests that at least part of the unit, or its veterans, were still recognized by Rome much later than the popular legend allows. So what truly happened? The most plausible historical explanation is less cinematic but more complex. The ninth may have been severely weakened in a conflict, perhaps during the major rebellion in northern Britain around 117, and then withdrawn from the province. It could have been transferred east to fight in the Jewish revolts or in the wars against the Parthian Empire, where it may have finally met its end, disbanded after catastrophic losses, or simply merged with another legion and faded from the administrative roles. This bureaucratic fate, a transfer and a quiet disbandment, lacks the drama of a last stand, yet it asks a more profound question: why are we so captivated by the legend of a lost legion? Perhaps it speaks to our fascination with the idea of a clean, dramatic end, a definitive moment where history turns. The reality is often messier, a slow fading of records, a unit reassigned, its identity dissolved into the vast machinery of empire. The mystery of the ninth is not necessarily one of a single catastrophic event, but of how a formidable institution can simply step off the stage of history, leaving us to wonder whether it fell in battle or was merely reassigned and forgotten. This disappearance of a military force gives way to a mystery of an entirely different kind of loss, one that involves not soldiers, but an entire language and the people who wrote it. A simple clay jar sat among artifacts from ancient Iraq, its purpose seemingly mundane. Inside, however, was a curious assembly, a copper cylinder sealed with asphalt containing an iron rod. Dating from between 250 years before the Common Era to 650 years after, this object, often called the Baghdad Battery, presents a puzzle that could rewrite a chapter in the history of technology. If it was truly a battery, it would mean the principles of electrochemistry were understood over 1,000 years before Alessandro Volta invented his voltaic pile in the year 1800. The idea was first seriously proposed by German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig, who suggested the jar could generate a small electric current when filled with an acidic electrolyte like vinegar or lemon juice. Modern replicas have proven this is physically possible, producing around 1 to 2 volts of electricity, enough for a faint tingle or a very dim glow. The most compelling proposed use is for electroplating, the process of depositing a thin layer of gold or silver onto another metal surface. This would explain a curious aspect of some artifacts from the region, which appear to have exceptionally fine, even layers of gilding that are difficult to achieve with traditional mercury gilding. Imagine an artisan in a Parthian workshop using a series of these jars to gently apply a golden sheen to a small statue or piece of jewelry, a secret technique passed down through generations. Yet, for all its intriguing potential, the battery hypothesis faces significant and reasonable skepticism. No wires or conductors have ever been found with such jars. No ancient texts from the region describe anything resembling electrical experiments or applications. No objects have been conclusively proven to have been electroplated using this specific method. Many archaeologists argue the jar is exactly what it appears to be: a storage vessel for sacred papyrus or parchment scrolls, with the iron rod acting as a core for the rolled document and the asphalt providing a seal against moisture. The copper cylinder would then simply be a protective casing. This debate strikes at the heart of how we interpret the past. Are we seeing a brilliant flash of proto-science, a technological path explored and then abandoned, its context lost to time? Or is this a classic case of pareidolia, where we project our modern understanding onto an ancient object, seeing a battery because we know what batteries are? The jar does not proclaim its purpose. It sits in silence, a vessel that could have held scrolls of scripture or the first faint spark of controlled electricity. Its legacy is not in what it powered, but in the questions it forces us to ask about innovation, loss, and the narrow line between a sacred container and a scientific instrument. This potential for forgotten knowledge gives way to a mystery where the silence is not accidental, but meticulously crafted. Deep beneath the rice fields and ponds of Zhejiang province lies a hidden world of staggering scale. In 1992, a local farmer draining a pond uncovered not mud, but a dark opening that led to a colossal, man-made cavern. This was the first of the Longyou Caves, a network of 24 gigantic grottos hand-carved from solid sandstone, a project of such immense, silent labor that it completely vanished from China's historical memory. Each cave is an enormous underground hall, some reaching heights of 100 feet and spanning areas larger than a modern sports arena. The walls, ceilings, and massive supporting pillars are all covered in a mesmerizing, uniform pattern of parallel chisel marks, a signature of the ancient masons that gives every surface a deliberate, textured beauty. Engineers who have studied the site are astounded by the precision. The pillars are not randomly placed, but positioned with an understanding of load distribution, holding up ceilings of incredible thinness for their span. The walls between adjacent caves are also consistently thick, suggesting the diggers had a master plan and the surveying skill to avoid breaking through into the next chamber accidentally. The volume of rock removed is almost incomprehensible, estimated at nearly 1 million cubic meters. That is enough stone to build a small mountain, yet not a single piece of this excavated material has ever been found in the surrounding area. Its disappearance is the first part of the riddle. The logistical challenges are equally baffling. How did the workers see what they were doing? No soot marks from torches have been found on the ceilings. How was the space ventilated during the excavation to prevent workers from succumbing to dust and poor air? The caves feature pools of water that connect to an underground river, which may have been used for drainage, but the sheer orchestration of labor, light, and air for what must have been generations of work defies easy explanation. Within the echoing halls, other mysteries deepen. The caves possess remarkable acoustic properties, where a whisper at one end can be heard clearly at the other, suggesting the shape was designed with sound in mind. On some walls are carvings of animals, including fish, horses, and birds. One prominent depiction is of a large fish, which some researchers interpret as a symbol for prosperity or a clan emblem, but its true meaning is locked in the past. Local legends offer poetic explanations, speaking of the caves as a palace for an immortal being or a hidden retreat for a deposed emperor, but these stories offer no concrete answers. The central question remains: what purpose could justify such a monumental, secretive, and utterly unrecorded endeavor? Was this a secret mining operation for a precious mineral that was later completely extracted? A hidden ceremonial complex for a forgotten religion? A strategic reservoir or storage facility on a scale never before imagined? The complete absence from official records is perhaps the most haunting aspect. A project requiring the removal of 1 million cubic meters of stone would have been a massive state undertaking, involving thousands of workers over decades. Yet not a single scroll, not one administrative record, no folk song or local chronicle from any dynasty mentions their construction. It is as if the very memory of the work was carved out along with the stone. What does it mean for a civilization to create something so vast and then collectively forget it? The Longyou Caves stand as a monument not to a known king or a celebrated dynasty, but to anonymous human effort on an epic scale, a testament to a purpose so important to its time that it consumed generations, yet so mysterious to us that its silent, echoing halls offer only questions. This profound underground silence finds a startling parallel in our final mystery, one that illuminated the sky with a brilliance no one could explain, written not in stone but in fire and light. The summer of 1518 in Strasbourg was not just hot, it was fevered with a different kind of heat. In July, a woman named Frau Trophea stepped into the city's narrow street and began to dance. This was not a joyous celebration, but a compulsive, ceaseless motion that she could not stop. Within days, dozens had joined her, and within a month, the streets swarmed with hundreds of citizens caught in the same frantic, uncontrollable rhythm. They danced for days without rest, their bodies pushed far beyond the limits of endurance, leading to widespread exhaustion, injury, and, according to the chronicles of the time, even loss of life. This was the dancing plague, a real historical event that reads like a dark fairy tale, a mass phenomenon where the line between mind and body seemed to completely dissolve. Medical historians like John Waller, who has studied the event extensively, place it within a perfect storm of hardship. The region was reeling from severe famine, devastating illness, and profound religious anxiety. The psychological distress of the community, Waller suggests, was so extreme that it manifested in this spectacular physical outburst, a condition modern medicine might classify as a mass psychogenic illness, where distress spreads through a population and expresses itself through physical symptoms. But what could actually trigger such a bizarre and specific response? One long-standing theory points to biology, specifically the ergot fungus. This mold grows on damp rye grain and contains compounds similar to lysergic acid, the base of LSD. Ingestion can cause convulsions, hallucinations, and a sensation of burning skin, symptoms that could be misinterpreted as a compulsion to move. Yet, this theory has gaps, as ergotism typically causes gangrene and painful spasms, not the coordinated, days-long dancing described in the records. Other explanations look to psychology and culture. Could this have been a form of stress-induced trance, a dissociative state brought on by collective trauma? Or was it a religiously charged copycat phenomenon, where individuals, believing themselves cursed by Saint Vitus, a saint associated with dancing mania, performed the very act they feared as both a symptom and a plea for deliverance? The city council's response reveals how deeply they were gripped by the mystery. Following the prevailing belief that the dancers needed to literally dance the affliction out of their systems, they made a fateful decision. They cleared a marketplace, built a wooden stage, hired musicians with pipes and drums, and even brought in professional dancers to keep the afflicted moving. This official sanction, meant to cure, only poured fuel on the fire, legitimizing the behavior and likely drawing more participants into the frenzy. The contemporary accounts paint a horrifying scene, a public square echoing with gasping breath and the slap of feet on wood, a spectacle of human endurance turned into a communal nightmare. As suddenly as it began, the plague faded by early autumn. Some historians suggest the authorities finally reversed course, banning music and dancing and leading the afflicted on a pilgrimage to a shrine for healing. So what does this strange chapter truly reveal? It is a stark lesson in the immense power of belief and social contagion. It shows how a community's unspoken fears and sufferings can erupt in a shared physical language when no other form of expression seems possible. The dancing was not an act of joy, but a desperate collective scream written in motion. It forces us to ask where the mind ends and the body begins, and how thin the veil can be between individual will and the powerful currents of the group. In the frantic, exhausted steps of Strasbourg, we see a mystery not of external forces, but of the internal landscapes of fear and hope that can, under the right pressure, make history dance to a terrifying tune. The silent sky since the dancing plague of Strasbourg is a reminder that some mysteries are written in the human spirit, but others may be whispered from the stars. On a quiet summer night in 1977, that cosmic silence was broken, if only for a moment. The Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University was engaged in a patient, systematic search, scanning the heavens for any signal that stood out from the natural radio hiss of the universe. Then, on August 15th, the data recorder printed out a sequence of letters and numbers that would become legendary. Astronomer Jerry R. Amon, reviewing the printout days later, saw a vertical column with the alphanumeric sequence 6EQUJ5. In the system used, this represented a signal so extraordinarily strong that he circled it in red pen and wrote a single, emphatic word in the margin: "Wow." That 72-second burst of radio waves, coming from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius, remains the most tantalizing and unexplained event in the history of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. What made the WOW signal so special was its precise character. It was a narrowband signal, meaning it was concentrated on one specific frequency, just like a radio station. That frequency was 1420.406 MHz, which is remarkably close to the hydrogen line, a fundamental frequency emitted by the most abundant element in the universe. Scientists like the late SETI pioneer Jill Tarter have long suggested that the hydrogen line would be a logical cosmic landmark, a likely channel for any civilization wishing to announce its presence. The signal also displayed the telltale rise and fall in intensity expected as the big ears fixed dish scanned across a point source in the sky, further confirming its extraterrestrial origin. The immediate and obvious question was, could this be us? The exhaustive search for a human-made explanation began. Was it a reflection from a passing satellite or space debris? The signal profile did not match. Could it have been a secret military transmission? No known earthly technology at the time fit the signal's unique parameters. For decades, the mystery persisted, with even natural explanations like a comet's hydrogen cloud being proposed and later disputed. The most haunting fact is that despite over 4 decades of repeated, targeted searches by telescopes around the world, the signal has never been heard again. It was a one-time event, a solitary shout into the cosmic dark. This singular nature is at the heart of the ongoing scientific debate. Could such a powerful, artificial-seeming signal be produced by a natural astrophysical event we simply do not yet understand? Or does its fleeting, unrepeated nature suggest something else, perhaps a transient, directional beacon from a distant source that swept past Earth and was gone? The implications are profound. If it was a deliberate transmission, even one not meant for us, it would mean we are not alone, and that intelligence has crafted a message powerful enough to cross the interstellar void. It represents a fragile thread of hope, the idea that someone else might also be looking up and wondering. So we are left with the printout, a circled code, and a handwritten exclamation of wonder. Was the WOW signal a greeting we were not yet advanced enough to answer, or simply the universe playing a trick on our instruments? In that 72-second span, the infinite quiet of space spoke, and we have spent every moment since listening for an echo that has never come. The ultimate question it leaves us with is not just about what we heard, but about how we bear the weight of the silence that followed. These scattered puzzles, from vanished colonies to dancing plagues, are not merely random gaps. They form a distinct pattern, a map of the very edges of human understanding. When we step back, we see that history's greatest mysteries often cluster around the same fragile points where knowledge itself breaks down. The first and most profound thread is the severing of memory. Civilizations that built in stone, like the Inca or the creators of Carnac, left breathtaking monuments but no manuals. Their techniques were living knowledge passed from master to apprentice through demonstration and song. When that chain was broken by conflict, illness, or cultural transformation, the how and why of their work vanished with the last practitioner. The Longyou Caves are a perfect monument to this silence, a project so vast it must have been central to a society's identity, yet not a single written word or oral tradition survived to tell us its purpose. It is a library whose books were all burned, leaving only the empty, magnificent shelves. Equally powerful are the limits of what physical evidence can whisper to us. Archaeology is the science of interpreting fragments, but some fragments tell a frustratingly partial story. A ship is found seaworthy but abandoned, like the Mary Celeste. A battery-like object is unearthed with no wires or diagrams beside it. We have the artifact but not the intent. Was it a sacred vessel or a scientific tool? The object itself cannot say. This interpretive gap becomes a vacuum, and human imagination has a powerful instinct to fill voids. When faced with the silent Moai of Rapa Nui, the first modern observers, unable to see the ingenious walking method, crafted a parable of ecological suicide. When confronted with the geometric perfection of the Great Pyramid, some minds leap to lost technologies or otherworldly architects. These are not just wild theories, they are a testament to our deep need for narrative, for a cause that matches the scale of the effect, especially when the straightforward, human explanation feels insufficient to our modern eyes. Our own perspective also shapes the mystery. Many of these events are mysteries to us because they represent a way of thinking that has been lost. The Polynesian navigators did not need a compass, they read a living ocean. Their skill was so embedded in their culture that it may not have been considered extraordinary enough to document in the way we document inventions. Similarly, the builders of Sacsayhuamán operated with a tactile, communal engineering wisdom that was never meant to be written down in a treatise. We look for blueprints and ledgers, but they worked with rhythm, rope, and generational patience. Our technological frame of reference can blind us to solutions that are elegant in their simplicity, like rocking a statue upright, or profound in their environmental literacy, like following a bird to land. Finally, we must acknowledge the role of sheer chance and the fragile nature of evidence itself. The Antikythera Mechanism survived only because it sank in a shipwreck and lay protected under layers of sediment. If that ship had sailed on, it would have been lost forever, and we would have no idea such technological sophistication existed. The Tunguska Event happened over an unpopulated wilderness, a cosmic warning shot that left a scar but no witnesses. Had it occurred just a few hours later in its rotation, it could have erased a city and become not a mystery, but a historical catastrophe of known origin. History is written by the evidence that endures, and so much simply turns to dust, is recycled, or is swallowed by the sea. What this pattern reveals is that history is not a settled record, but an ongoing conversation. Each new tool, like the computed tomography scans that unlocked the Antikythera Mechanism's gears, or each shifted perspective, like re-examining the soil of Rapa Nui, can suddenly illuminate an ancient shadow. The past is not dead because we are still asking it questions, and sometimes, against all odds, it finds a new way to answer. Our journey through these 20 silent chapters ends here, but the story they tell is far from over. Each one, from the carved word at Roanoke to the single flash of the wow signal, stands as a testament to the incomplete nature of our own story. History is not merely a record of what we know, it is equally defined by the vast and haunting spaces between the facts. These are the gaps where evidence runs out, where chronicles fall silent, and where our modern logic meets a wall of ancient stone. They force us to confront a humbling truth: for all our technology and archives, the past retains its secrets with a stubborn grace. The true power of these mysteries is not in their potential solutions, but in the questions they keep eternally alive. They are perpetual engines of curiosity, challenging the arrogance of any age that believes it has finally figured everything out. They remind us that our ancestors were not primitive, but often possessed a different kind of sophistication, a knowledge of stone, stars, and sea that was written in experience, not textbooks. When we look at the fitted stones of Sacsayhuamán or consider the navigators who crossed the Pacific, we are not looking at puzzles to be solved so much as conversations to be joined, a dialogue across time about human ingenuity and resilience. So let this exploration be an invitation rather than a conclusion. Which of these historical whispers speaks to you most deeply? Does your mind linger on the silent deck of the Mary Celeste, or does your imagination soar with the builders of the Great Pyramid? The conversation continues with you. Share your own theories and fascinations in the comments below. Join our community of curious minds by subscribing, and keep looking into the shadows of the past, for that is where the most compelling stories are often waiting to be found.